get going. Hi, everyone. Our economy is showing symptoms of an infection. Record corporate profits, gloating in the face of Americans struggling every day with high prices. An unexplained divergence between the wages that workers earn and the productivity that their labor provides. And rampant inequality. Capitalism is supposed to create broadly shared prosperity because it runs on the engine of vigorous competition. Competition incentivizes firms to offer the best products, the best price, and the most creative forms of innovation. We've reached unprecedented levels of corporate consolidation. This chart shows how all of your favorite food brands are actually owned by the same 10 companies. So the infection of our economy is a problem of competition. And it's even worse. Today I'm going to tell you the story of how our competition problem, we've let it fester. It's grown into a really, really bad disease, a disease of the 21st century. See, for almost 150 years, antitrust law, the governing policy of free market competition, saw collusion as its supreme villain. Those secret agreements where CEOs meet up in smoke-filled back rooms and agree to set a higher price, to rig bids, to divide up markets between themselves. The Sherman Antitrust Act, passed all the way back in the 19th century, could not have foreseen the collusion of the 21st. Because today's cartels are not formed in smoke-filled back rooms. No. Today's cartels are hidden in code, hiding behind a complex array of AI pricing algorithms and data sharing schemes, disguising brazen corporate collusion. So the problem for us is, are our antitrust laws antiquated? Are we stuck reconciling a medieval institution with godlike technology? Last year, the Department of Justice sued 6 major corporate landlords for participating in a novel collusive scheme. It wasn't landlords getting together in a smoke-filled back room, shaking hands, and agreeing on a higher rent, like ChatGPT has wonderfully illustrated for us here. It's a new type of collusion, and you have to dig under the surface to find a little-known, secret, third-party facilitating company called RealPage. RealPage markets itself as AI revenue management. They say, we'll use some fancy technologies to calculate the optimal rent for our client landlords to charge their tenants. Okay, optimal for whom? Which landlords? Allegedly, about 90% of the United States rental housing market. That is, nearly all the rental properties and apartments in America using the exact same platform to fix their prices. Obviously, this creates a real problem for competition. This is usually where I get the oohs and the ahs. Because centralizing all of the price-setting power in the hands of a single company, an entire industry, probably pretty bad. But you don't need to take my word for it. Take theirs. They have consistently marketed their product as, quote, raising the tide, which means driving every possible opportunity to increase price. Sometimes they say the quiet part out loud. We're trying to get everybody to succeed rather than have competition. There was a real estate conference in Nashville at which the vice president of RealPage, Andrew Bowen, was asked whether he thought RealPage had any effect on the estimated 14.5% rent increases taking place in some markets. Here was his response. Quote, I think it's driving it, quite honestly. How does this work? What's going on here? What is going on is that RealPage is asking every single one of its landlords to collect extremely confidential, competitively sensitive information and fork it all over to RealPage. Plus, RealPage Market Analytics makes over 50,000 calls every month to competitor landlords around the country, surveilling over 11 million units to get the highly confidential, non-public information on rents, unit sizes, leases, tenants, all sorts of characteristics about these rental properties. They're using that to feed it into the algorithm, and then the algorithm figures out what exactly the monopoly rent is for all of the participants in this cartel, which is almost the entire industry, to charge. So RealPage comes up with this rent, it offers it to landlords. They're not forced to charge it, but the system does have an auto-accept feature, making it the default rent. It's also extremely hard to undermine this auto-accept feature because if any particular landlord doesn't want to abide, doesn't want to comply by what RealPage has suggested, then it has to actually provide extensive business commentary, written business commentary, which is subject to review. So RealPage assigns to each and every landlord its own personal pricing advisor. So the personal pricing advisor, which has a jurisdiction to review these business commentaries, and if it doesn't like whatever the reason is that any landlord is not complying with RealPage's rent recommendation, then it will have a, quote, accountability conversation. An accountability conversation where it tries to remind the landlords of their long-term goals. Worst comes to worst, actually, they just exclude the landlord entirely from the service. So we have RealPage lurking in the shadows, acting as a monopoly rent setter for the American housing market. But this didn't just come about naturally. In 2017, RealPage acquired its major competitor, LRO, which also offered revenue management services. Recently, RealPage has planned to completely phase the LRO algorithm out of commission, meaning all along, the idea was buy and bury to establish RealPage's dominance. Americans are facing really high rents. Rents are increasing dramatically faster than wages, on average eating half of our wallets. And as students, as college students, as young folks, we know what this feels like. All right, we're seeing our country being driven toward an affordable housing crisis. And RealPage, our housing code cartel, is sitting at the wheel. We also know that housing is not the only industry in which corporations are paradoxically thriving while everyday Americans are struggling. Last year, the United States healthcare industry was the subject of a nationwide public debate, largely prompted by the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson by Luigi Mangione. Obviously, that murder was unequivocally wrong. It did spark conversations across all kinds of political lines about how we might reform the American healthcare industry, including commentators highlighting how the top health insurance companies in the United States have raked in almost $500 billion in profits since the time of the passage of the Affordable Care Act. Really good evidence that most health insurance markets in the US are highly concentrated. It's a characterization that is according to the Antitrust Enforcement Agency's own numbers. High concentration, that makes the market ripe for code cartels. Enter MultiPlan. So MultiPlan does basically the exact same thing as RealPage, but instead of driving up rents that landlords charge, it helps health insurance companies limit the amount of money that they have to pay to the doctors and hospitals actually providing life-saving care. From 1996 to 2008, United Healthcare was actually running this cartel, and they got caught. They were using a common pricing tool called Ingenix. They got sued, they had to pay a whole bunch of money to remedy, including not being able to participate in this scheme for a really long time, 5 years. That's it. 5 years later, the same companies all started rolling onto MultiPlan. And they hired the exact same people that were working on the Ingenix conspiracy. I mean, how blatant and how appalling. So RealPage and MultiPlan look really similar to each other. They do a very similar thing. Here, MultiPlan is collecting all of the data, spitting out a price that insurance companies can use, middlemen, to hoard wealth for themselves while paying the least amount possible to the doctors working to treat our patients. But code cartels don't just come about in this way. It doesn't need to be the case that they're explicitly suggesting or setting rents or prices. Sometimes these software companies can get around that and still effectively manage a cartel. So now I'm going to tell you about AgriStats, a data analytics and software company which holds a really impressive record. The second most sued company in the agriculture industry, which is actually a very impressive title to hold considering how many lawsuits take place in agriculture. The topper of which is Tyson. AgriStats works with primarily meat and poultry industry. And it compiles a whole bunch of data to produce statistical reports. These statistical reports are hundreds of pages long, and instead of saying, here's the price you should charge, and I'm going to make you accept it no matter what, it makes it very, very easy for competitors to track each other's prices and know exactly what their competitors are going to charge. Here's how. So let's say you're a chicken processor and you sign up to use AgriStats to receive its services of statistical reports. AgriStats is going to send its own setup specialist onto the physical premises of this chicken processor and spend roughly 2 to 3 weeks hooking up every single computer to AgriStats' system so that all of the confidential, competitively sensitive information AgriStats wants gets sent into their system in real time without processors having to do anything at all. AgriStats is providing statistical reports for about 95% of the US turkey industry and about 97% of the US poultry industry. Potato companies were also recently sued in a major class action lawsuit for doing pretty much exactly the same thing. The two of which together probably help to explain why it's hurt so much to go to the grocery store recently. You guys might be wondering, this seems so appalling. How could we possibly have let things get here? And the answer is complicated, but if I were to sum it up, I'd say decades and decades of not looking, of just not enforcing our antitrust laws. The reason why is a little-known group of scholars and intellectuals started bringing new ideas to antitrust in around the 70s and early 80s. One example is Robert Bork, who actually taught law here at Yale. Robert Bork was so committed to the idea of the inherent self-regulating nature of free markets that he said, if we really care about consumers' prices, we shouldn't do anything because the government's just going to create more harm than good. He called this idea the consumer welfare standard, which means if we really care about consumer welfare, the government should let every merger fly by, every monopoly be, and in some cases, pretty much let naked cartels do whatever they want. That is until another impressive Yalie came along. Just a few years ago, Lena Khan was a Yale law student here on our campus. And she wrote a paper that went viral, suggesting that these ideas are kind of BS, even though they sound crazy to us, but they really worked hard to persuade a whole generation of courts, politicians, and antitrust practitioners themselves. Her viral paper was called Amazon's Antitrust Paradox, in which she argued, let's try this out. Let's go after Amazon for monopolistic practices. So President Biden appointed her to be the chair of the Federal Trade Commission, and she did just that. Went after Amazon for monopolistic practices, one of which is particularly interesting and I want to highlight. A hidden mini code cartel called Project Nessie. So Amazon makes over 2.5 million price changes every day. Project Nessie is Amazon's effort at monitoring which of those price changes their competitors might have actually followed, which means they're trying to take every conceivable opportunity to inch prices up and see, are their competitors matching? Is there an opportunity for us to all raise prices at the same time? If not, I can monitor it and check it because my really sophisticated algorithm is constantly, in real time, scouring the entire internet. Amazon's own internal documents show that even though its price hikes led to reduced sales, it netted Amazon a total of over $1 billion in profits from 2016 to 2018. And Amazon knew it was doing something sus because the moment that it starts getting regulatory scrutiny, it turns Project Nessie off. It did that 8 times over the course of Nessie's history. So speaking of regulatory scrutiny, and probably the question you guys are all wondering, what can we do? Or what is anyone doing about this? Well, every single one of these code cartels is being sued, either by the US government or by an assortment of private plaintiffs. We are still waiting largely on the results. Some have come in, and I hate to say it, they are not very promising. One code cartel engineers collusion between casino hotels. Two separate class action complaints allege that this algorithmic software called Rainmaker was creating anti-competitive effects, both in Las Vegas and in Atlantic City. Both of those complaints were dismissed by judges on the grounds that there was no evidence of an agreement consistent with the black letter law of 20th century antitrust practice. Here are those complaints being dismissed by judges. But we're living in the 21st century, and code cartels are infiltrating every corner of our economy. Right? Housing, shelter, that's RealPage. Medicine, healthcare, that's Multiplan. Food, groceries, that's AgriStats. And almost every online retail product, that's Amazon. I mean, what's left? I don't want to wait to find out. I'll tell you that much. As AI develops rapidly, code cartels are only going to grow in sophistication, in reach, and in how hard it is to enforce. I don't want to wait for judges to wake up, so it's time to speak up. When things get really bad, sometimes Congress actually does something. So in this case, Congress has actually introduced legislation called the Preventing Algorithmic Collusion Act. It's actually heavily supported on both sides of the aisle, introduced by a bipartisan group of senators. And this legislation is very simple. It simply updates antitrust law to say that even if competitors aren't agreeing in a smoke-filled back room, code cartels are still really bad, and they still violate the law. I think this is really promising, and I would urge you all, if you're as appalled as I am, if you're as worried about code cartels as I hope this presentation made you, call your congressman, call your senator, see if they can sign on to S-232, the Preventing Algorithmic Collusion